The first speaker here tonight from Sandford Park School. And I am here alongside my handsome singing colleague Nathan to strongly propose this motion that social media does more harm than good. Now, this is a relatively straightforward motion, requiring little by way of definition. There are, however, two elements of the phrase which we believe at least require something more by way of clarification. These being the term social media, and secondly the phrase more harm than good. In the case of the first, we agree absolutely with our friends in the new Oxford Dictionary of English that social media in this context refers to websites and applications which enable users to create and share content or to participate in social networks. While in regards to the second, we hold that this refers to a condition within which the advantages which accrue from a particular feature or phenomenon are outweighed by the disadvantages associated with its existence. In other words, we are saying here tonight not that social media does no good at all, that it is entirely without virtue, but simply that the benefits are completely outweighed by the disadvantages associated with its existence. With this in mind, we've divided the work in the following way. Our second speaker, Nathan, will look primarily at the history of the matter, the way in which social media has affected individuals and groups, while I, for my sins, will look primarily at the cultural context, the way in which social media has contorted our understanding of the world and helped to transform the international choir of nations into one great, global, whispering, small-minded rumour mill. For Affirmative, we now live in a global village, but villages have their vices as well as their virtues. The various social media platforms may facilitate a free exchange of information, but this is information that is not subjected to any oversight, editorial control, or indeed the fundamental principles of human decency. When people have a medium by which they can say anything, that is exactly what they will say, ladies and gentlemen. Anything. Whether it be reasonable, rational, responsible, or even sane. And this is a world in which we now live in, ladies and gentlemen, a world certainly being brought closer together, but not by a phenomenon that values unity or tolerance, but rather by the uncensored ramblings of a million faceless madmen who sit in their bedrooms, spitting their venom, unleashing their bile at an unsuspecting world that has in some way let them down. Ladies and gentlemen, I am sure not everyone behaves thus. I am sure there are those amongst us here tonight who simply chat to their friends, who engage in charitable acts, who don't say an unkind word against anyone. But the horrible truth of the matter is that this particular majority is less culturally significant. Evil can be fascinating. People are drawn to it. And whether through a desire to be shocked or curiosity, the innocent are aware of the guilty, and though disapproving of their actions, are existentially affected by them. In the end of the day, according to Boyle, the truth of the matter is this. We have created a new sphere of social discourse that exists almost entirely beyond the normal checks and balances of the real world. A sphere that has taken on a life of its own. A sphere that lays down its own conventions and social mores. There are those who, in regard to this growing menace, speak to us of the rights of free expression and freedom. There are those who tell us that the problems brought about by social media are brought about by its misuse, not by its very existence. But we would maintain that any phenomenon which pervades slander as comment and rumour as news and starts largely oblivious to the fundamental disciplines of law, civilization and government, then we would maintain that it is difficult to envisage how in any sense it could ever be seen as doing more harm than good, more good than harm. Good start. It's a pleasure to be here. Good night.
We'd like to begin by saying how honored we are to be able to speak to you, debate before you tonight. We'd also like to extend a thank you to all the friends, family, faculty, and of course our Irish visitors this evening, especially the choir for that incredible performance. We'd also like to thank Coach, Grandma Julia, and Mrs. Henninger for orchestrating this. And we'd also especially like to thank our opponents here for traveling all the way from Ireland for this debate and for agreeing to argue against social media in front of an audience comprised largely of high schoolers, will be hopefully live tweeting this event at hashtag social media is good. When we heard our opponents would be starting the debate in Irish, we felt it would be only fair to respond in kind. This task unfortunately fell to me, so here goes. Gia Gwitch, Balchi Goji, Dua Abel, Go Rao Mahagat Astosu or Ngia Sport as Goelga. Talmage Tarish Block to or Goelga as the main Socialta. I have been told that this means both. Now, we'd like to begin by observing that social media is simply another form of communication. And I think we can all agree that communication in general is good. Our opponents implicitly concede to this by even participating in a fundamentally communicative activity like this debate. And while it is our good fortune to be here debating in person in front of this live audience, for many marginalized people around the world, the only free and open debates are conducted through social media. Now, our first argument is that social media has improved interpersonal relations. Many have claimed that social media has eroded true human connection. Yet these misguided fears are to be expected. As The Guardian notes, quote, new technologies always provoke generational panic. In the 1930s, parents fretted that radio was gaining an invincible hold of their children. By the 1980s, the great danger was the Sony Walkman, producing a teenager who, quote, throbs with orgasmic rhythms, as philosopher Alan Bloom put it. When you look at today's digital activity, the facts are much more positive than you might expect. Rather than replace face-to-face communication, new technologies augment it. As Barry Wellman of the University of Toronto explains, quote, online communication does not replace more traditional offline forms of contact. Instead, it adds to them, increasing the overall volume of information. Because of social media, we can be in touch with others wherever we happen to be, but that does not mean that we eschew face-to-face contact when it's available. The Pew Research Center found that a typical Facebook user, quote, has more close friends, has more trust in people, feels more supported, and is more politically involved than someone who doesn't use the site regularly. Now, our second argument is that social media leads to a better informed and more politically active populace. According to the University of Connecticut, news articles are by far the most common type of external content shared on Facebook. And people who share news stories on social media sites such as Facebook tend to stay engaged in the news longer than those who simply read it online, especially if their post leads to a deeper discussion of events among their online friends. These discussions are often more substantive than you might think. Now, polling has shown that 66% of social media users have used social media to engage with a political issue. 25% have become more active in a political issue after discussing it online, and 16% have actually changed their minds about an issue after discussing it on social media. This has in turn led to increased participation. The Pew Research Center found that, quote, controlling for demographics and other types of internet use, compared with other internet users, a Facebook user is 2.5 times more likely to have attended a political rally or meeting, 57% more likely to have tried to convince someone to vote for a specific candidate, and 43% more likely to have voted. Now, we have all seen examples of this type of social media activism through campaigns like hashtag Bring Back Our Girls, begun by an ordinary man in Nigeria, Ibrahim Abdullahi, that was ultimately tweeted more than 4 million times, and by such world leaders as David Cameron and Michelle Obama. Abdullahi explained that, quote, before Bring Back Our Girls, there was almost a total news blackout about the abduction of 219 Nigerian girls. The campaign created awareness to the plight of the schoolgirls and the people of Northeast Nigeria. Similarly, hashtag Ferguson has helped raise awareness of racial problems in the United States and was tweeted more than 8 million times. On a more positive note, last summer the ALS Ice Bucket Challenge helped the ALS Foundation raise more than $115 million. Our third argument is that social media increases democratic legitimacy in countries with repressive regimes that limit more traditional forms of political discourse. Philip Howard, a professor of communication at the University of Washington, writes that, quote, that social media played a critical role in the Arab Spring, both in galvanizing support for the protests and for organizing them once they began. For instance, during the week before Egyptian President Hosni Mubarak resigned, there were more than 230,000 tweets per day about political change in Egypt. And in Tunisia, Twitter was used to organize a rally of over 100,000 people that toppled the long-standing Ben Ali regime. When people were not allowed to discuss regime change in public, as Catherine O'Donnell, also at the University of Washington, explains, quote, online activists created a virtual ecology of civil society, debating contentious issues that could not be discussed in public. A similar situation occurred just last year in Ukraine, when social media helped to galvanize the Euromaidan protests that ousted the corrupt Yanukovych government. Pablo Barbera of NYU identifies social media as, quote, a pivotal organizational tool for the protesters and the most relevant mechanism for disseminating and exchanging information both within Ukraine and abroad. Thus, because social media has allowed for deeper, better informed, and more democratic communication the world over, we negate the resolution. Thank you.